So we got a lot to talk about, man. It is
Do we though? It's pretty simple.
ish, ish. I
I mean,
mean,
we can talk. I don't think, yeah, no shortage of energy to talk. Even though it's a 12th moon, we can be chatty. Plus tea.
yeah,
It's really
it's
good.
well, yeah. So we're drinking 7572. It's a 2014 vintage. That makes it 11 years at this point. Delicious tea.
Amazing.
In and of itself.
Yeah.
Ginseng
Just
aroma, petrichor flavor profile.
incredible.
It's great.
Yeah.
But what I did was I added rose to it. Might not look like much, but these are full rose
Oh,
buds.
yeah, that's different than what you gave me.
Yeah. Pardon.
Mhm.
These are full rose buds.
In the
And
bag.
yeah. 2 keys of rosebuds. Feeling like a
You can
drug
get in
dealer
trouble
here.
for that.
But you could see it. I wish you could smell this, but it's an entire
It kind of
bud
matches my
that's been. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
kind of
take that.
matches. Oh, what?
It's really, really nice. It's a full grown, mature rose. It's been
Dang.
dehydrated. And so I threw one of those in with the brew. And so it's adds a rich
Just
complexity.
gonna hang on
And
to it.
the cool thing about it is you need boiling hot water to brew your pu'er well. And the rose being such a prehistoric, it's a dinosaur flower. It's old and meaty. And so it can take the boiling hot
take the
water.
heat.
Whereas other flowers, other
Oh, yeah, they get
herbs,
kind of like they almost
yeah,
they
they
just
scald.
yeah, they just get dispersed. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And you'll get like really bitter, really astringent.
Right.
But the
Right.
rose can take the heat. And so
That's a really good idea. Like I think I might start combining rose with my pu'er.
I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner. My grandmaster out in Oahu, shout out Grandmaster Chris Matsuo, he was like, "Do you have any tea that's not caffeinated?"
Mhm.
And so I was like, you know what? I just so happen to have something. And then not one to take a task from my teacher lightly. It's like, oh, can you get me some? I was like, how about 10 kilos? So,
Monkey with a dog hour. That's what that is. Monkey with a pretty strong dog hour. I got your back.
Sifu says, get something like, yes, Sifu.
Yeah. I just planted you a whole garden.
That's what you wanted, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, now we have roses, and added to the brew adds such a beautiful depth all through the olfactories, and you know the tea is so earthy and in and of itself, and then add the rose, it really feels like you're in a rose garden.
Give you, yeah, there's a lot of dynamics. Like meaty is a great word, you know, even though obviously it doesn't taste like meat, but it's got this kind of like full spectrum, you know, like really hearty kind of flavor profile.
Yeah, and the rose itself, you're right, it's not meaty, but there's meat
There's
to it.
there's
a density.
Yeah, there's
to
a
it.
lot of gravity
Yeah.
to it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wish you could be here.
Yeah. So yeah, look. Ooh, and what I'll do is I will pull this out.
Oh.
Right. And so it started as that. Now it's kind of the tone of my skin.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Versus that burgundy. And so that's what I was telling you about, how the pigment
takes the tea takes
out.
the pigment out. Yeah.
Yeah, but then it replaces, so now you're getting this dark rose petal.
Yeah,
it's like the color exchange.
Right.
Yeah, so go back in there.
Mm-mm.
Good. Well, that's a nice way to start our show today.
Yeah, we're just going to talk about this tea.
Yeah, who cares that it's New Year?
Yeah, whatever.
New Year.
Yeah, happy full moon. Yeah, happy full moon.
Today
this
is
the last full moon of the Wood Dragon year.
Yeah, I love this time of year because this is when they call it, there's a headbutt So this is snake butt. No, no, no. Dragon butt snakehead.
Yeah, like the tail of the dragon, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
kind of, yeah, this is the,
It's the cusp, right? But they do it for everyone.
it's the business end of the
Yeah.
dragon.
So my favorite is monkey transitioning into rooster, because then you get monkey butt chicken head.
Which is kind of interesting because, you know, when it comes to transitions, the going from a wood dragon to wood snake is actually pretty seamless, or it feels seamless now. It's not going to feel seamless like when the first moon hits. That's another conversation, but like right now, it feels like this kind of really smooth, relatively smooth handoff, even though obviously a fire ox can bring up a lot of changes and a lot of activity and a lot of like forced kind of movement. You know, the chi of the fire ox is, you know, oxen, like the 12th moon is essentially an earth moon. There are 4 earth moons every year, and they serve as a kind of pivotal transition between the seasons, right? So your dragon goes from spring to summer, your goat goes from summer to fall, and then your dog goes from fall to winter. And then the ox goes from winter to spring, back to spring. And so the idea in the Tongshu is that the earth comes up and facilitates the transfer from one to the other. In this case, from the water element to the wood element. And in so doing, it's it's considered to be bearing, like earth buries the previous element, which was metal in this case. So earth buries metal in the 12th moon. In doing so, what it's burying is this conservation, is this notion of conservation and the need to edit and downsize. It's still present, but basically now it's shifting. So we're no longer conserving. We can actually prepare because we're about to go forward again, right? So this kind of conservation energy is getting buried, you know, in preparation for this kind of first steps of expansion. You know, the first moon, the first and second moon even are not about like how fast you can go, right? That's not really what the wood element is about. It's about this kind of freshness, feeling and following the freshness, right? And so in order to be able to feel that freshness in the first 2 moons of the year, in the 12th moon, the recommendation is go quiet, go still. Like preparation, definitely. There's a whole thing we can talk about, like with respect to the full moon time, right? And what happens in the last 2 weeks of the 12th moon is a lot of preparation. But it's like inward, right? It's not expansive. It's what are we doing in the home spaces? Like how are we clearing out the home spaces? How are we preparing the home spaces? In opening up the home spaces, you know, a lot of clutter comes out of the winter. You got to get rid of all that stuff. And you got to kind of downsize a little bit in order to then welcome the expansion of the new year. So if you're continuing to like try to grow and accumulate through the 12th moon, then you got no place for spring. That's the idea. So you have to kind of stop, slow down, clear out, get this kind of sensory capacity re-engaged through that sort of slowdown. So that way, when the first 2 moons come, you know what freshness feels like. But if you don't stop, if you don't slow down and kind of go inward and come on this like or access this yin dynamism, like the dynamics of yin, very, very rich, then you'll never know what it's like. You'll never know what freshness feels like.
That's an interesting thought, a dynamic yin, because I think of yin as like a nothing or a pit.
But an obstacle.
Yeah. And then to give it movement or life or dynamism, it seems yang. That's a yang characteristic.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So yin is form, right? And yang is movement. And and form has a precedent, has a momentum. And so if you think about all the momentum that went into your being here at all. That is a lot of momentum and a lot of dreams. 10,000 people, horny enough to meet someone else and hang out, and then developing their own dreams for how they want their family to be. Like all of that is in everyone, right? So from a human centric standpoint, which is what we're talking about, the 12th moon calls upon like our heritage of our precedents. That's why ox is always associated with the ancestors. That's why ox is the number one sacrifice to the ancestors, is this kind of appealing to what's considered to be a continuity.
Wow.
So there's no everlasting soul, in this cosmology, none, but there is a continuity.
Wow. Are we practicing heathen arts?
Yeah.
When Shannon just said that the ox is the greatest sacrifice, I just immediately felt Moses smite me.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I remember.
Shout out Moses, by
Moses,
the way.
yeah. Good looking out. So this notion of like the sacrifices necessary to create spring. That's what Moses is against, right? These sort of ritual sacrifices necessary to invoke spring. So for instance, like this has been around as long as humans have been humans, right? Is to say that in order to invoke the plethora of possibilities that is spring, we have to sacrifice something really, really valuable and really, really old, to facilitate the transfer of power from yin to yang. There's ritual necessary behind this. It's not just the shamans calling the dragons down. It's appeasing the exorcistic capacities of yin that have been operative for a couple months now. It's sending them home, right? So they're not sticking around and causing trouble. It's like cleaning the space. There's tons of ritual. Ling Shu practitioners in the Xiandao practice of our dear teacher, Lu Ming, are very busy during this time because they're essentially just trying to clean up the space. So that way, when the waters come down, right, they're not picking up all this loose debris and spreading it all around. It's sort of a clean transfer of freshness and possibility that comes from yang being released. And where is it released from? Frozen water, from yin, right? So it has to come out from behind this sort of rejuvenated energy that yin brings. Yin brings this rejuvenation. We have stockpile yin. Right now, we've been feasting on yin. That's because that's what the environment's offering us. So it's an opportunity to kind of store up your capacity for movement. But if you're still spending it while you're getting it, then again, you don't have this kind of, you don't have the stockpile of yin to then access what meaning feels like, what freshness feels like. So going back to Moses, you have all these rituals that basically invite the coming of spring. And some of them are these kind of physical sacrifices. But many others are actually, like Ming would say, like they're grain-based societies, not meat-based societies like some of the nomads. So what they would do is they would put grain inside this representative of the ox. They put grain inside it. And then on a ritual day, they would break it as a sacrifice, and all this grain would pile
like
out.
a piñata.
Yeah. And so they would break it, and all this grain would come out, and everybody would clap and go, "Yay!" Like that's the celebration and welcoming spring to do that. So if you're a theist and you're a practicing theist, and God is speaking to you, you don't want any of that, right? Because there's only one source of your life, fertility, happiness, success, all of that comes from that one source, that one mountain God. And so that's why he's breaking all the altars. And it's not to say necessarily that they're right and they're wrong, but it's a distinguishing mark, because Moses is obviously a leader of the chosen people. In order to be a chosen person, meaning under the protection and guidance of this particular mountain God, we have to distinguish ourselves from these other people. We don't do this, we don't do that, we don't do this, we don't do that. And one of those things is this kind of like, we don't practice these pagan, symbols
Wow.
that have been around for tens of thousands of years, like ridiculous, like cross-culturally all around the planet. Most people have some symbol of fertility that they invoke and then sacrifice in some way around the time of spring in order to welcome and facilitate their arrangement with their surroundings, like with nature. So all those rituals are like incredibly important. And going back just to talk about the ox, all has to do with like cultural convention. It's like what the ox represents, Vietnam versus the United States or China, like all very different, but what they symbolize at some basic understanding is this kind of appeal to stability, right? That we can still move as long as we're going along conventions, so we can minimize mishap or misstep or wasted energy, and that we can, and so it's going to be conservative by its nature, right? It's not going to be expansive for risk taking. No, like bad idea. Like you're spending the resources that are collective, right? You need to be in this kind of in the fold of the continuity of our behavior as a society. And that's the ox is also this continuity. It's very, very important, to Chinese cosmology and society, especially from a Confucian standpoint, is this continuity, because the continuity itself, from a Taoist understanding, is immortality. There's no like live forever. There's only your participation in the continuity of existence. And because of that, you're already immortal because you're participating.
Wow.
Yeah. So ox is that kind of ox is that continuity. But it does require, some stepping back. It does require some like really sinking into stillness in preparation for this feeling of freshness to arise. If we're just all ambition, then ox is kind of meaningless and dull. People are tapping their foot, waiting for it to be over, or they're making decisions and resolutions based on something ungrounded, right? And then by April, they fail.
Yeah, false notions.
Yeah, a very, very strong time for these kinds of false notions of self, rated from a Buddhist standpoint and Taoist standpoint, rooted in this notion of false ideas of self, false notions of self. But there is a richness here, that's like hard to describe. That's why I say, we don't need that much time, because it's really about the kind of nourishment you get from deepest sleep, dreamless sleep. How do you feel when you wake up from dreamless sleep? Like, great, right? That's the blessing. That's the kind of ancestral kind of rejuvenation. That's the rejuvenation of yin that's available right now, during this time.
That's an interesting thought, like waking up from dreamless sleep, because that was the argument of why meditation is more restful than sleep. Because even in sleep, there's karmic resolution, right? There's dream state, there's bardos, there's chasing and fulfilling,
right?
But meditation, specifically non-conceptual,
right,
is zero,
right.
And so it's actually more restful in a non-conceptual meditation than it is to sleep, at least for someone plagued by nightmares or something like that.
Sure, yeah. So very interesting scenarios can happen. It's important to I think it's important to recognize and start in that conversation with this with the assumption of dreaming practice from a Taoist standpoint as leading you down a path to understanding that your waking and sleeping lives are not separate, and that there's actually very little difference between so-called waking and so-called sleeping. So this is the view teaching that your that your practices allow you to discover, in your experience. But you can't really talk about it because everybody's experience is different, and you can't really even verify it. I mean, the interesting thing about like meditation or non-conceptual meditation practices the whole point is that you can't declare success. There's no possibility of it. Whereas I was thinking about it actually. This came up.
We can't win meditation.
Yeah, this came up in my own.
I can't get a high score.
Right. So if you're practicing a conceptual model, then you have guideposts, and that's the whole point of a conceptual model, is to generate an experience that then generates the next experience that then generates the next experience, and that might involve mantras or teachings or even like some kind of deity worship, and utilizing these practices under the guidance of a guru, right, is to kind of walk you along these places. And there is, depending on where you're at in the yanas, like there is a place where they tilt toward a non-conceptual reality, right? And there are conceptual steps toward a non-conceptual experience. There are.
So it's just like go the other way on the circle.
The non-conceptual, just like sitting and forgetting, so on, is don't bother with any of that. Just go sit, adopt the posture. The posture is really the only teaching. And then the view. You read the view to support the posture. And then in the posture itself is just, you just sit and forget.
That sounds like Zen.
Very much so. Yeah, there's a lot of, from Ming's historical teachings on Zhuang, no one really knows where it came from, but Zhuang actually does lead to Zen, does lead to maybe even different forms of Buddhism. Like Zhuang, where it came from, nobody knows. So it has like just the practice of sitting and forgetting. Like there's, the Zen kind of quietude approach, like stilling the mind. See, that's the difference between Zhuang and like Zen, is that Zen is focused on mind, whereas Zhuang is actually one practice of a handful of practices that go together that actually are concerned with mind and body being the same thing. So that's why posture is important, and that's why Zhuang leads to Neigong. Because then Neigong is actually concerned with the movements of the physiology and what's happening as a consequence of practicing Zhuang. Right? So they're intended to kind of be put together along with all the other practices. Whereas Zen, you can just go Zen, and then they're hitting you and like saying it's the mind, it's all mind. So it's not really about your physiology. Whereas the Taoists would say, oh no, your physiology is definitely important. Like it's actually part of the deal. So that's why you can pay attention to your breath if you want to, but it's not required for the actual practice. I'm not a teacher of this, so but this is part of my training and my practice as an astrologer is to work in these ways too. So it is this kind of like unnamed space, right? That is essentially what anybody ever is.
This is particularly interesting to me because when I first went to Wudang, I have a psychology professor. He's a dean of psychology. Shout out Dr. Santi. He's since retired. But when I first went to Wudang, he was so fascinated with my journey. He was like, "Oh, you have to ask your teacher." Zhuangzi talks about non-conceptual, and he talks about mirror mind. What's the difference? And then so he had me go to my teacher to ask. I'm like, Shofu, my professor from college wants to know, what's
this Westerner wants to know,
what's the difference between sitting in forgetfulness and mirror mind? What's the difference? He goes, he's thinking too much. Right. And then that was his only, he's thinking too much. Right. But it's almost as if it's his wanting to understand it analytically and conceptually.
Analytics, that's the whole Western tradition, in relating the benefit of a practice back to some material. Oh, it lowers your blood pressure and like all these things. Like you're not. It's if you're not participating and fully seeing the context of the view, then it doesn't mean a lot. Yeah.
That's true, huh? What's the point of discernment if there's not a conversation of which one's better or worse? And if there's no conversation of which one's better or worse, then
Yeah.
shut up.
Well, and that's why I think ultimately some of the reflections from these sorts of traditions would say it's the belief, it doesn't has nothing to do with anything, right? The belief is actually a really shallow thing people throw around at each other who don't practice anything, right? They're just they're just working with beliefs because it sounds good, it makes them feel right, or something they were given, or it could be a variety of different reasons why you have a set of beliefs that you're not tracking. You're not tracking where your beliefs actually stem from in your own experience. You're just sort of throwing them at darts at people, and having that kind of adversarial nature, which is actually indicative of cultures based in a theistic revelatory approach to life, right? So there is this kind of sensation thing we're all looking for, whether it's our own discoveries or demonizing someone else. Same. These are the same. These are very much the same. So having beliefs of any kind, really not that important. What this tradition would say, what are you doing? Like, what are you actually practicing? Like, are you practicing? I mean, the reality is you're practicing something. You are. Everyone's practicing something. And so the goal, any goal, especially now in the 12th moon, bring it back to the point, is to look at what we're practicing. It's like examine, like pay attention to what you're actually practicing, because it has content, and that content, even if it's the most menial thing, it actually doesn't matter at all. Like I mean, from the Taoist standpoint, it's all perfect. Like there really isn't anything wrong with any of it, but you should look at what you're actually practicing. And in the 12th moon, you might see that what you're actually practicing is something that you inherited. Very much so. Like,
yeah, I'm a practicing couch potato. I got the grooves to prove it. I like that question. What are you practicing? And it's almost like a Dharma slap. Last week you were Dharma slapping. Last month rather. So there's a qigong for that. And in this conversation of what are you practicing, and even to tie back into dynamic yin, but I like this conversation of what are you practicing, because we have ninja practices. So as to say, like, I'm practicing, but you wouldn't be able to tell observably.
Yeah.
He could be doing some microcosmic orbit stuff right now.
Right.
I'd be unaware.
Right.
Because that's an internal experience.
Right.
Subjective, if you will. And so it's kind of like a ninja practice. I practice, but you don't know I'm practicing. Yeah. And so the practice, the secret ninja hidden practice is what are you practicing, right? Dynamic yin, tying all these things together is just sit. And there's a conversation of movement within stillness and stillness within movement. And so here we are being still, yet there's so much movement.
Constantly.
And so the practice then would be the observation, witness, and celebration of it, right? And so I'm still, but I see my breath move. I feel my heart rate. I feel the circulatory system. I feel my nervous system. There's so much movement inside of this stillness. And so the practice then is being witness, observing.
Feel like
rah rah shish kumbah, like go team, yeah.
The one thing I would say, like in relationship to like specifically the Zolong, which is, that's the posture, just sitting, is this relationship between being and doing. And that the whole idea, conceptual framework around something very non-conceptual is to look at this like very loose relationship between being and doing. Anything that's in being as self-arising, and everything that is in doing as self-resolving. So This is the view.
Let me let that one sit.
Yeah, sit with that one for a minute.
Yeah.
All things arising are self-arising. All things in being are self-arising, and all things, all doing is self-resolving. Everything, yeah. So that is the view.
Dharma.
And in that view, you do have this relationship between being and doing, meaning that like there is a kind of point where being gives rise to doing, right? And just sitting, there is this experience of our being, which is in doing simultaneously, right? That it only continues to be if it's doing internally. Yeah. So you get all these kinds of really interesting nuances, like, and you can, I think the image that Ming used was, it's like walking up a river. You get this little stream of doing, and you keep walking up a river, and then the stream gets busier, like and more forceful, until you're sort of at the source of inspiration. There's a gigantic waterfall and like lots of things going on, right? And so it's not necessarily about like it needing to be peaceful. It's not like a bubbling, quiet little spring. It's probably like a ton of stuff. Like, so getting up next to that and sitting and just letting it be what it is, right? Like, and like not trying to make it anything other than what it is. That's, I think, in my experience of practicing Zhuang, is very much what you're doing. And it's just a practice. It's not, because it's non-conceptual, it doesn't generate anything. If we were in a conceptual space, then we could talk about one state generating the next state, generating the next state. When you're going straight for non-conceptual, there's no generation. So one day it could be like, that was just, oh, so amazing. And the next day, like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. It sucks, You could have, and it's all completely, it's only your experience. Like nobody's checking, nobody cares. It's not anything you should record, because it's the image that I use a lot of times in my own practices, understanding that you are a glass of water in the middle of the ocean. And the only thing you have to remember is there's no glass. So if dye, red dye comes up in the middle of the glass and you're super disturbed by that, just there's no glass. And so the dye just disperses into the ocean, because that's what all things do. When things arise, they resolve of themselves. And that is the nature of, this is Wu Wei. This is Wu Wei, this is Wu Wei. This is the view of Wu Wei. So here we are, talking about like this amazing kind of empty space, and it being filled with being, and that there is a momentum to this being. Again, this is the whole dynamism of the 12th moon, is that whatever you're looking for, you already have. It's like actually there in you at this time. Yeah. And whatever you're thinking that you need to go after is premature. So like setting intentions in the 12th moon, don't bother. Yeah, don't bother. Just prepare space for, being able to expand again when the wood element comes around on the first and second moons and you get to expand, right? You prepare, but you don't set intentions.
Got it. So we're not planting seeds, we're turning soil.
There you go. Yeah. And even that, like, is probably not until like right as you get close to spring, because the idea is the ground's too hard. It's still earth element, some prohibitions in like nomadic cultures, no tilling the ground in the 12th moon. No, like that's because because the other aspect of this is that everything in existence and animistic understanding of the universe has a precedent. So there are spirits everywhere. It's not just your ancestors, it's everything in their precedence and in celebration of their togetherness in this yin dynamism. So if you go like clear a field, you're basically mowing down, you're committing genocide, essentially. You're committing a kind of spiritual genocide. So yeah, and the reality is there's consequence for that will visit you with bad crops and whatever you plant there. So it is an animist understanding of the world that we're talking about. So it's live and let live, it's going back to basics. It's this kind of like, and it's also this initial exploration of Gagne, which is this natural resonance. Don't have to overthink it. Like we're kind of closing our journey through winter. And we made agreements to certain people before we went in, as we're going into winter, being like, you got my back, I got your back, I got your back too. And now it's like this kind of also ritualistic celebration of like, whew, we made it, and like, and in the last, especially after the full moon, in the last 2 weeks, even if you got buddies and alliances and people you made agreements with, you're pulling back from those things now. And you're only supposed to be in that home space with your blood family in this kind of real deep preparation, because it is this kind of like you're supposed to be forgetting and cutting back it all again so that you can then go out and expand. And that's the reason why during the spring festival, we bring everybody dumplings, because you're reuniting, you're remembering like your agreements that you have with people, but nobody should expect anything from anyone, during this last half of the 12th moon, for sure. Like, because everybody understands that you have to go inward, you have to go back and get your stuff ready, because everybody's going to have their coming out party and their birthdays. Because the first 12 days of the spring festival is basically everyone's birthday, back to 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 back, right? So if the first day of spring festival is a dog day, all dogs have their birthday. That's why in the calculation of the 10-year and the 1 year, we don't look at their birthday. We look at the beginning of the year, because everybody has a birthday for their fate. That's when their fate for that year engages. On that day, their 1 year and their 10-year cycles start.
Wow. Well, that just
Pretty
answers
cool.
a lot of questions that I didn't know that I had. Okay, because that's come up.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, so I mean, I had that question for me. It was one of my first questions. It's like, so does this 10-year cycle start at my birthday? Or does it start? He's like, oh, it's your birthday at the beginning of the year. I'm like, oh. And it's everybody's birthday. It's like all pigs,
And what a great system.
Yeah.
For if you don't know what time you were born or don't have records of that, just all right, everybody's birthday.
Everybody's birthday, on this day. Yeah. And it's also kind of in alignment with another aspect of the view, which is
you ain't special.
Yeah, the thing that's most important about you is what you share with everyone else. Yeah, which is the reason why it's the year of in the calculation of your fate and your chi character. It's the year that holds the most weight, not the hour. Right? The year holds the most weight, because if you're a rabbit and you're born with all the other rabbits, like you're participating in a continuity, in a collective momentum. So there's another collective momentum that comes with just the time. In the 12th moon, there's a collective momentum that comes with your genetics, like your blood has all the information of everyone that's ever been in your line of human beings. 10,000 people flow through your veins.
Damn.
Right? So this is the momentum of your life, and it's not anything you need to worry about. Like, it's actually taken care of. It's already taken care of for the most part. There may be instances where you have unsettled ancestors, for sure, that cause you to have bad habits or affect your health in some way, and that's actually coming up this 12th moon and in the first moon. But you have people on your side. This is the time when your beneficial ancestors actually come to your rescue, and they basically, well, we set you up for this. You're bait so that we can reach this crazy Uncle Harry that's causing everybody problems. And then when you resolve, whatever it is that plagued you, or you finally get that rest and that great nap where you wake up and you're like, you know what? I don't feel like smoking anymore. Like, that's when you dropped into that space where it was just empty. You were the field on which that negotiation happened. You were the locus point of all the beings that came before you. And so there, you're not the only one there. And so in the 12th moon, you can really feel that. You're not the only one that's there. And so again, this very esoteric knowledge, nobody needs this knowledge. Like, no, you don't need it. Like, you don't need to know this, not really, just go to sleep. Like, you'll be fine. Everything's good. Don't, this is, if any time of year, like, of course, through the winter moons, we've been saying all the different kinds of slow, right? But this is a really good time to like really keep it routine and make sure you go to bed early and rest, so that you can access freshness. Okay. And that the business end of all your ancestors gets handled. Uh-huh. And then they're not bugging you. And then you have actually more freedom where you can make intentions. Intentions are related to freedom. If you have no freedom, you can't make intentions. You're only carrying forward someone else's intention. This is very odd. This is very odd for us, isn't it? Doesn't it feel odd?
And it also seems like we just took out one of our segments too. That seems like the flavor of slow, right?
Which is
routine. It's not necessarily getting out into a hustle bustle, but this is a time of preparation. This is a time of activity.
Yeah. Preparation and activity. In previous conversations, I said it's automatic pilot. You're on automatic pilot, and some people kind of bristle at that, like dragons, like, oh, no such thing, like, because they imagine themselves to be full of intention, right? But this is the time of year where intentions are like whistling in a wind, where it goes nowhere. It just like evaporates into everything else, right? So join the stream, would be the idea. Okay. So that's done through routine for the most part. And again, following your instincts, as I've written about this before, follow instincts, not intention. So if your instinct or your appetites, this is where Ganying's coming up, like this resonance idea, like, you know what, I really want to redo the bedroom. Let's redo the bedroom. I had this happen to me the other day where I was like, I've been feeling it. So it's not brand new. It's something I kind of took into winter. Where I was like, something needs to change here. I'm not sure what it is. Something needs to change. Okay. And then one day I was like, just grabbed the bed and just turned it and like started moving stuff. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't even know if it would fit. But it was just like, I need to try something, I need to kind of go about that. Now, if you have training like this, the 12th moon would be the time where Ming is moving everything around in the loft, right? The cube. He's moving the cube near the door or back in the corner, and he's moving this around, and this will be the teaching space, and the seating will go like this. And like, because he was skilled in that way as a feng shui practitioner, he could do all that. And so that would answer the other question.
Everything was on wheels too.
Right. And very helpful. Very helpful. I moved that cube one time. Boy. Whew, yeah. So that would answer the other question of like, what would Ming do? He'd be rearranging. Yeah. Like reorganizing the kitchen, maybe cleaning things out, like preparing, getting ready. Like spring is also the time where you do the Marie Kondo business, right? Yeah. Like you kind of, I need to sell this and get rid of that. It's, so it's not that it's limited to just the 12th moon, this kind of preparation of the space and the welcoming of spring. But there is a kind of elemental, instinctual thing that starts happening around that it can be really family oriented. Everybody's sweeping, right? If you have more responsibility, let's say like the emperor had a lot of shit to do, right? To get the whole country ready for spring. There's a lot of work in the 12th moon. We're not like the emperor, right? So we don't have to. There's a lot of things you don't have to do. And especially in a fire ox moon, I would encourage people, like, if you don't have to do it, don't. Like, because it's easy once you think you can start going and like, hey, just keep going and you keep doing more things. So you got to be really careful with that. Especially this first couple of weeks has been like that, where I've ran into that, where I'm just like, man, I'm exhausted. Like, well, I had like 10 things I was trying to do today, because we are going in this temperate era where we are, where it's temperate. We have fall spring, which we have every year in January, fall spring. In the mid 60s, everybody thinks it's spring. It's still January.
Yeah. Oh, those were the last couple of days. It was just gorgeous.
Gorgeous. But then you're like inspired. I'm going to go for a run. And then I go to the store, and then and then you get to the third thing. And you're like, I'm tired. And like, yeah, that's because you're still in winter. Right? Again, seasonal yang hasn't arrived, really. It's wiggling underneath the snow, metaphorically.
That's why resolutions burn out so easy this time of year, right, sir?
Or you're speaking with the voice of an unsettled ancestor, right? That has no intention of resolving. Like, you don't have the intention yet to resolve them, right?
Yeah, maybe you need to go hiking tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to go hiking every Tuesday and Thursday. That's my plan. And then Saturday comes and you're like, well, maybe I can make it. I don't know. You see. So we all do this, we've all experienced this. Again, 12th moon is really no big deal. Like, you don't really have to judge yourself. You don't have to do any of that stuff. It's better. The less you do is the better, in terms of like how you relate to your activity, which means eventually kind of slowing down and stopping.
There we go.
And especially from these next 2 weeks, doing your best to like retreat inward. Don't talk to nobody. Don't go out. Don't eat out. Just eat at home. And prepare. Yeah. To beat. And then, and when the first moon starts and Spring Festival happens, like you'll just automatically go, and you'll have the energy to do it. And a lot of us, I know, speaking as a member of this Western culture, you're working so hard in January, and you're so tired, you don't even notice Lunar New Year. Oh, is that today? And you're not prepared for spring.
Yeah.
And so you're not rejuvenated by winter. Yeah. You're exhausted by it.
For sure. Especially this year too. The winter just boom, flew right by.
Went so fast, right? I was like, yeah, it's gonna be a quick winter.
Already over.
Yeah, it's already over. Yeah.
It feels just like just last moon we were talking about how fast winter was gonna go.
Yeah.
And
bam, now it's
fire rat, fire ox.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Right around the corner now. And here it comes. And it's gonna, So like, I think that if we did that, which I did a little bit of that, this, fire rat, fire ox, go, 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 like, I'm anxious, I got to do something, like this kind of vibe. Now is a good time to be like, okay, pull the plug and just rest, and do what you need to do to kind of prepare and orient yourself for spring. But just remember that the first 2 moons of any year are wood element, natively wood element, which means it's just a loose idea. There's no strength. There's no strength to spring. Strength to spring doesn't arrive till 3rd moon.
And so we also have fire snake, earth tiger.
Fire snake? Oh, you're talking about wood snake.
Oh, it's going to be a wood snake year?
It's a wood snake year.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would just say, and what I'll be presenting with John Coco on the 25th is it's coming to Earth. So you can glide in and land softly, or you can hit hard, but you're going to hit the Earth, right? Because the dragon is wind, never touches the ground. But the snake is all belly. So we're all going to hit the ground.
Yeah. And I remember Ming saying that's why the snake was closest to God, because it spends its entire life in prostration.
I like that.
Yeah, full prostration.
Yeah.
Entire life is submission to the divine. So we're a little bit all over the place today. We've done our flavor of slow. We've done our what would Ming do, a little bit out of order. That's okay. It's getting done. We've done our qigong, so now it's good luck, bad luck, who knows?
Oh yeah,
right. And then that's it.
And then we're done.
Yeah, and then just hexagram.
Shout
out Connie.
Yay, Connie.
She really enjoys that, by the way.
Does she?
Connie.
Oh, good.
Shout out Connie. We love you.
That's a really good question. I was thinking about that on the way over here. I think that I wish I could remember the one that I was thinking of. Unprepared.
1 in 12 shot. 1 in 12 shot. Go.
There's I think oh yeah, 32. just name out a number. 14. No,
Bingo.
32. 32. I'll use 32. I think that's a little optimistic in some ways, but it is about this continuity of experience. It's called constancy. And it speaks to this kind of, just this continuous experience of transmission, this notion of transmission. Transmission is big when it comes to wood element. And that'll be something we'll be in some ways discussing a little bit of.
Look how pale that became.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So you guys can see.
It's like,
Isn't that gorgeous?
looks like a napkin now.
That used to be this color. Right? And then now it's that color.
We've been drinking all that red.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. This was a gray sweatshirt.
All the colors. All right, we're coming up on our hour. Good luck, bad luck. Who knows?
Okay. So a lot of the advice I would have for any of the earthly branches in the 12th moon has a lot to do with the fact of who's going to do well in the snake year, right? Because we are kind of, you can't have a good 12th moon and then a bad snake year. So there's going to be a kind of bleed over in terms of the influence there. The ones that tend to do the worst or have the most challenging time are your forward going figures, like your dragons. I'm going to overlap instead of the 4 groupings. There'll be a little bit more overlap in this, like your dragons, who are impatient sometimes, depending on the element involved in the dragon. But your dragons, your horses, and your tigers. Dragons should still pretty much sit this one out, but horses and tigers also the same. Like for them to stay too routine is a little bit of a challenge, you know.
Would rabbit also fit in that mix too?
Rabbits, it really depends on. It really, as with the case with rabbits, always it depends on their context. If they have like sort of a safe and secure kind of situation, they shouldn't go outside that. Because they could get inadvertently kind of bumped or trampled, which is, which can be scary for them. And this is going into, what is that?
Battery running low.
Okay, real quick. So they should slow down. Those 3 should slow down. Rabbits, all the domestics should be all right as long as they've got a safe domestic situation, and they should stay there. So especially your goats, but definitely your pigs and rabbits should stay close to home, because that's what the 12th moon is about, is this kind of staying close to the familiar. Oxen do incredibly well. It's a great family time. Snakes also very familiar with this kind of constancy bit, very easy for them. The ones that rooster's been having quite a lot of hard time for the last few years in general, somewhat challenging. So this new snake year is a bit more of a blessing for them, but there'll be some challenges in terms of reinvention and flexibility and kind of expansion. So there need to be some kind of keep an open mind vibe, still with even with a wood snake, but they able to access the things that they care about a little easier. So they can kind of get a head start, a little bit. They're the only ones in the 12th moon that I would say they should sort of access their concepts of like what's important. It'd be easier to access this moon, and they can carry that forward. Shouldn't get too aggressive about it, especially the first 2-3 moons of the year. But this is a kind of good check-in point for them. Very, very, very favorable. I would also say that about snakes as well, that's available for them.
Okay.
as a grounding technique, because for snakes in a snake ear, sometimes uncomfortable mirrors that come up. So very important to kind of get grounded in the things that they're intending, the things that they have an appetite for in the snake ear. But no pressure. It's actually not important that you do that. It's not like you'll miss out or something. That's not what we're talking about. Monkeys, this is actually one of their worst moons because of this kind of continuity bit. And they should start hunting for amulets for their snake ear.
Okay, what'd that mean?
Meaning, snake ear is not necessarily like a challenging year, but it's good to kind of call in protection.
Oh, okay.
So investing in kind of amulets to wear or to put around the home get actually really good idea for monkeys this year. So it's monkeys shouldn't call a lot of attention to themselves. And then I think tigers we talked about. Okay, rats. Rats, lock it down. Get ready to kind of keep it very, very simple. Snake ears. It's not. This is so. Both monkeys and rats could have gotten a little bit overconfident in a dragon ear. It happens, and the snake is gonna basically set you straight, and kind of. So if you did get on, not saying that you did, but if you did, you'll know pretty quickly. So for the rat, it's good to have all your essential things kind of sorted out. And this is a great time of year to do that. Get very efficient, get very lean, and then don't expect, get lean and as a way to welcome spring, but don't expect a lot to come right away. That's what I would say. And then I think that's everything.
Goat?
Goats in with those domestics. They should really don't expand your social network. Keep it very, very, very tight. Close to the breast is a good idea, and will continue to be a good idea through the snake year. It's for goats a lot of political intrigue that comes with the snake. And so talking about going down like a rabbit hole of what they call that conspiracy theory, and goats would be very, very vulnerable to that this year.
I've got goat-like tendencies.
Yeah, they can. Yeah, so there's that available to goats in this year. So they should use this. Not even use this year. It's just sleep through this moon, or really get very close to your foundational network of people. And coast.
All right.
Cheers.
Good tea today. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a fan. I like the square. It's been a wide-ranging discussion.
Yeah. So see you guys soon for Chinese New Year.
We're going to do it live.
Yeah, Shannon is going to do the event at Coco's on the 25th. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be with my father-in-law and my son. We're going to go see Monster Truck Saturday, one day only. It's actually Saturday and Sunday. It just doesn't work out for me. But so Shannon is going to be at Coco. Shout out Coco over at Coco Wellness. A few of my disciples, Fanua and Oko. Both very capable.
Yeah.
They're going to make sure it's all recorded. And so we'll have those recordings for you guys. And then that's on the 25th live in person.
Right.
On the 29th, day of, Shannon's going to be here. We're going to do a live broadcast. And so for those of you who want to be on that list, just hit us up. It's going
to be awesome. We're going to eat.
We're going to eat dumplings.